Yeah, so let me introduce myself. My name is Edgar. I'm originally from Brazil. I've been living in Berlin for woohoo, just like Márcio. It's a Brazilian night here in Warsaw tonight. I actually saw there's a Brazilian restaurant just around the corner, so we can have beers there. Yeah, so I've also been in Berlin for a couple of years, and I'm now working for a company called Memorado. We do brain training games, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And usually people end talks like this, but I would like to go reverse and start the talk saying "Chikuye." Is that correct? No? Okay, yeah. Saying thank you for inviting me, for coming here, because I think it's been a really nice experience. Instead of just flying from Berlin to Warsaw, I actually decided to take some vacations, brought my wife, brought my 1-year-old. We've been spending a few days in Poland, and we spent some really nice days in a city called Szczecin. Correct? Yeah. So yeah, my Polish, as you can see, is very poor. And this is very hard word for me because it starts with 4 consonants, and that's something that we don't have in Portuguese at all. And I'm not saying that Polish is a complicated language, but maybe Portuguese is just way too simple. And I cannot compare it to Polish. But since I've been trying to learn German for a few years, I can compare it to German. And as you can see, German has a little bit more definite articles than Portuguese, for instance. And that, I don't know if that proves that German is way too complex or if Portuguese is way too simple. But even if Portuguese is a very simple language, no language is as simple as English, right? Because if we use that metric to compare simplicity of the languages, then English is by far the most simple language that we use today. And that might be one of the reasons why when we are going to launch an app and we want to say that it's global, we want to launch it in English. Of course, there is lots of economical and political reasons why English is very widespread, but the simplicity is definitely helping the language being so widespread. And when we want to launch an app and we want to say it's going to be a global app, we just say, okay, we're going to put it in English and it's going to be out there and everybody downloads it. And I think it's, I would like to change that way of thinking with this presentation for a number of reasons. I think that English is not a good way of saying that your app is international. And all of these reasons can be kind of summed up with this phrase from Nelson Mandela, that if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. And if you talk to a man in his language, that goes to his heart. And if you think about it, the relationship, somebody said it once, that the relationship between the users and our apps are kind of like a dating relationship. So first time that your user sees your app page on the App Store, it's kind of like that first look on a bar where you see the other person and they're really attractive. And when they decide to download it, it's like that first contact when they actually get to talk to the person. If it's a paid app, it's when you buy the drink. If it's a free app, it's just going there and talking to the person. And when they download it and they keep coming back to that app, it means that you have a relationship with that user. So I think it's something that when you have that relationship, you want to eliminate as many barriers as possible, language being the most important of them. So with that in mind, I'll give just a small introduction about what is Memorado and why do we think that internationalization is important and how we did it. And then I'm going to give 3 tips about how to automate. And by the end of these 3 tips, I want to convince everybody that even if you're alone doing your own app on your free time, you can localize it to many languages from day one, because there are ways to automate it in a way that you don't need a huge team, except for translations, of course, but that you can get from friends. And then, of course, we'll answer some questions. So a little bit about Memorado. We do games that improve your cognitive skills. So we have a suite of games that some games will improve your memory, some will improve your focus, basically improve all of the abilities of your brain. It's also playable on browser, iPad, iPhone, Apple Watch, and recently we've also released an Android version. And it's played all over the world. And when I say all over the world, I mean all over the world. This map is real data, and all the green countries are countries that have Memorado players. And as you can see, I'm a little bit colorblind, so I know for sure that there's a red spot around here, but it's hard for me to see. Yes, exactly, Western Sahara. It's the only territory where we don't log any users. And I don't know, but I think it's because their IPs get logged in as Morocco. Do you have any information about that, or do you know? Okay, yeah, maybe it's just not much people there. But it's the only territory in the world where we don't have any Memorado users. And I think this slide shows a very compelling reason on why English is not as international as we think. This is the actual data of this is the app downloads per language from Memorado, and as you can see, English accounts for only 22% of our users. And we've released an internationalized app from version 1. I think version 1 had 18 languages. Now it's around 26. And I would go on a stretch here and say if you're releasing your app just in English, you're missing out on all of these potential downloads in lots of nice countries. So the first tip is to find a good workflow. And like I said, I'll say it again, if you're developing an app, if you're starting an app, even if it's in your free time, you're a one-man show doing your app, split code and text from day one. That will help you not only localize it in the future if you plan to release for other countries, but also it will help you, it will help your mindset a little bit be wrapped around what is code and what is data, and then that your strings don't belong in your code. And then you don't have to do it all in just this one localizable strings file. You can actually separate your translations into multiple files. And the good thing about it is that you can do, or what I would recommend is actually that you do one strings file per screen. As soon as you have a new screen, create a new translation file for that and put all the translations there. Helps your app be much more maintainable and scalable in the future. By separating it in multiple files, multiple strings files, yeah, this is just a little bit off, but then you can use this function from NS bundle, localize string for key, and then if you just provide a table name, this one here, it will search for that on the correct file name. In this case, it would be home. And then the workflow that we have, which is actually really nice, we are using a tool called Web Translated, which is a tool that will provide a nice workflow between the string files in your code and the translators, and how they work and how these strings find their way back into your code. It's just one of the tools out there. There's other competitors. One of them I think is called Phrase App, and I'm referencing it in the links in the end of the presentation. But what this does is when we define or we create a new language file, we create it in English. We call this Ruby gem that they provide, and then we just say WTI push. It will push to the servers of Web Translated. And once it's in the servers, it will create web forms that the translators can use to input the translations to your text. And once all translations are ready, at any point you can just do a WTI pull, web translated pull, and it will pull the work from the translators into your string files again. And it understands lots of different types of translation. So you can translate JSON files, strings files, lots of different types of platforms. So once you do this WTI push from just the English file, this is how it looks for the translator. It will receive the text key over there with the text content, and it can type in the translation. And the advantages here is that the relation with the translators can be managed by someone in the company that doesn't have to have any contact with the coders. Also, the translators don't need any technical knowledge about touching strings files. They don't need to know that the strings files need to end with a semicolon, or that JSON have to be validated or anything. They'll just input translations on a web form. The translation update is done when the developer wants by calling this WTI push or pull gem. So once the translator translates, it's up to us to decide when that finds its way back to the code. And the output can be configured. So we're using the same WTI project for our iOS app, for our Android app, for our Ruby on Rails app, and for other JSON files that we have for translations. And I'll show some of them in the end in my second demo. And in the end, this is, of course, how it looks. You have your app translated into multiple languages. It looks the same, but it has different text. So I think finding a good tool set for enabling the work of the translators is something that's helped us a lot. And the second tip, I would say it's a bit more focused on iOS. So Android developers, feel free to shut down a little bit now. I'm kidding. It's not going to be so heavy, but it's a little bit more focused on iOS. But on iOS, we have the Foundation framework that can handle a lot of localizations that don't have to be in your strings files. So if you think about all the things that goes into your strings files, it could be tempting to put stuff like plurals, dates, and currency formats there, but we don't actually have to do that. There is formatters, specific formatters for dates, which you can just input one date and the formatter will know how to provide that date in multiple formats for multiple languages. The same thing happens for numbers and prices. You can just input a float and it will know how to format that for currency, even with currency symbols, formatting the price as something that's comfortable for people of that language, and even spell out the numbers in many languages. So all of that, of course, will be pulled up from the language that the user has on their device. So you don't have to worry about putting formatting strings in your strings files because the framework can do that. Another really cool thing is that it can also handle plurals and gender. So it does take a little bit more setup. And instead of talking so much about it, I'll just do a small demo. Yeah, so I did a small project here, and I will just show you it running in English first. And, oh, sorry, it's in Polish. So I'll just change the language here to English. Yeah, so it's a basic list of months, and then you can select the months. And this label down here, can everybody see the label down? It's a bit, I think I'm standing in front of it, but it will just increase the number with the amount of months that you have selected. That's basically it. And the plural for English is very simple, right? You just have, if it's 1 month, then it's month, and if it's 2 months on, then it's months, and that's it. You have just 2 words for plural, and that's it, for singular and plural. But in Polish, it gets a little bit more complex. And this is how we would do like a naive internationalization of this, which is the label doesn't even update based on the number, right? So I just have 1 month here, which is not nice. And that same thing would happen for Polish. If I just run the app in Polish now, you have the months here. I cannot pronounce the names of any of these, but I'm hoping, if my sources are correct, that this is also wrong, right? You don't have the correct plurals here, even though I don't speak Polish, but... Oh, really? Okay. Well... Okay. Yeah, well, the names of the months, I just grabbed them from the framework itself. I can show you how I grabbed them here. It's just NS date formatter month symbols. That's just what the framework gave me. And with my very, very non-existing knowledge of Polish, I couldn't know. But yeah, so that's a very naive approach. And that's, you just have the text label or the text here set to placeholder for the number and months. And it doesn't matter if it's singular or plural or what language it is. I just have the same thing defined as English and Polish. And what I'll do here is I will add, I'll add a file that's already existing here that I set up previously. And this is a strings dict file. And it's basically a property list file. I can open this as a property list first. Yeah. Maybe it's too small. Yeah, so this is the definition of the plural for English. I have phrase, which is my text key, and I have a placeholder for the text. And it just says, if it's 1, then it's month. If it's other, anything else than 1, then it's months. And I have also prepared here that file localized for Polish, which has the Polish language rules set up beforehand. So let me again open this as a property list. And the Polish language rules, I hope that my sources are correct. And I got them from unicode.org. And it says that for 1, there is a word. For few, there is another word. And for many, there is another separate word, which it's super complex. As you can see, Portuguese is much simple as a language. So yeah, since Polish has all these rules, I can just input this in my property list file. So I have, again, phrase, which is my text key, months, which is my placeholder. And I can just say, for one, this is how it looks like. For few, this is how it looks like. For many, and for other, hopefully this is correct. Again, you guys are going to have to correct me if it's not. But then, by just adding these files to the project, I can, let me just clean the product and run it once more in Polish. And as you can see now, just by providing the number to the text key, the framework will decide which kind of plural to use. I don't know if I'm standing in front, but if you can see that label all the way to the bottom is changing when I change from 4 months to 5 months, which is apparently a different kind of plural. Is this correct? Yeah? Okay, cool, awesome, great. Yeah. By the way, this demo is also hosted on GitHub, because I don't think that these meetups are for looking at the screen, memorizing anything, and immediately applying it. So I'll share the GitHub project and the presentation files also in the end. Cool. Another thing that is super cool that you can just leave for Foundation to handle is support for right-to-left languages. If you've been using auto layout on your applications, you can see that support for languages that are reading from right to left, like Arabic or Hebrew, is coming out of the box. So this is the main reason why when you're snapping the edges, the left edge is not called left, but it's called leading, and the right edge is not called right, it's actually called trailing. That's because they're not left and right. They're the beginning and the end, and once the language is becoming right to left, they actually switch from left to right to left. And as you can see, this is how the Memorado screen looks like in English on the left side and Hebrew on the right side. And there is a document from Apple with guidelines on how to structure your language for right-to-left languages. For instance, progress bars, they should actually progress from the right to the left, as you can see here. But charts and charted data should keep progressing from left to right, just like in other languages. So you have to be a little bit more careful with your auto layout constraints if you're going to support Hebrew or Arabic or any other right-to-left languages. The good news is that if you want, if you have a chart or any image that you don't want to be adapted to a right-to-left language, you want them to keep as they are, you can just uncheck this box on the constraint menu, and once you uncheck respect language direction, then leading becomes left and trailing becomes right, and then they're actually bound to the edges of the device instead of the edges of the language orientation. One thing that is really nice, if you're going to support languages like this, is to test with one pseudo language from the framework as well. It's called the right-to-left pseudo language. When you use this language, it's normally in the language menu. What's going to happen is it's going to launch the app in English, but with the orientation switched from right to left. It helped us a lot developing this screen, for instance. We have this gauge here that will go, when you're doing your brain training, it goes from rookie to master. And I was testing the auto layout things and just switching it to Arabic and seeing that everything was aligned and it was fine. And then when I actually when I found out that there is this right to left pseudo language, I realized that the rookie and master labels were switched. So if you're playing in Arabic, you're evolving from master back to rookie, which was not nice. So I think because I don't speak Arabic, I would never have found this bug if I wasn't using the right to left pseudo language. Another thing that's useful to know is there is another pseudo language called the double length pseudo language, and it will just run your app in English, but grab all the text keys and double the length of them. Just copy them, append them to themselves. And that's good for you to test if your layout is actually going to adjust for longer languages, like usually French and German are very long, they have very long texts. So to sum up the second part, the stuff that you have for free, you can use foundation classes for formatting, so don't need to put formatting code on your strings files. You can use trailing and leading constraints for adjusting to right-to-left languages, and you can test with pseudo languages to not tell your users that they're progressing from master to rookie, because that would not be nice. And the last tip is to automate delivery. If you've been working with iOS, you know this screen, which is the iTunes Connect deploy. And for each language that you're going to support, you have to upload a new features text, you have to upload new screenshots, and think about the kind of work that we at Memorado would have, because we support 26 languages, 5 screen resolutions, and for each one of these combinations, we have 5 screenshots. That would mean 650 uploads. And I've actually heard about companies that are hiring interns to do this work for them instead of actually automating this process. So for automating this process, we use 2 tools. One of them is Sketch. Sketch is a very nice design tool. Who here knows or uses Sketch already on the day-to-day? Nice. So it's not only really cool for the designers to use, but it's also it's a tool that enables a lot of scripting and plugins development. And there's a strong community behind it developing open source plugins. So what we do to actually make our screenshots be generated in an automated way is we use two different Sketch plugins that will localize all of our screenshots, and then we use a command line tool from Sketch itself that will auto export all these layers. And I'll also quickly demonstrate that. Let me just open here. So I have here, one Sketch file with all of my App Store images in English. So let me just go ahead and open that. So as you can see, this file has all of my App Store screenshots, all 5 of them for different device resolutions, and all of them contains text in English for the actual description of that screenshot. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate that file, and I'm going to rename that. Renaming. Oh, thank you very much. It's a bit slow. There you go. Ah. Why the hell is there no rename? Well, anyway, I'll just open it like this. So I have now a copy of that file. And as you can see here, all the layers, I don't know if you can see it properly. All the layers are named with the standard of finishing the name of the layer in English. So what I'll do is use my first plugin here, batch rename layers, and it will do something very simple. It will search for the EN text in every layer and replace it with PL for Polish. This will just allow me to when I export all the images, the names of the files don't get mixed up between the languages. So now that I have all the layers renamed to Polish, as you can see here on the left side, what I'll do is I'll use my second plugin, which is Translate Page. And that will just ask me for a JSON file that will contain all of my translations. And that is... I don't have the Polish file here. I have to do Portuguese. So as you can see now, all of the screenshots have been translated to Portuguese. And as a last step, I can just call a command line tool that will export everything. So let me just show. Here the work is being done for me. Instead of hiring a student, now I have all of my screenshots being generated for me on the fly. The names are going to be Polish, but they're actually going to be translated to Portuguese. My mistake. And that script is being called from... It's just called the Sketch tool, which is something that Sketch gives you for free. It's like a command line tool from Sketch. And I just made a bash file because I didn't want to type it all of that. But it's the Sketch tool. The reason why I didn't export here the Portuguese ones is because the files were locked. So when I click duplicate, I think it probably went somewhere else, and then this file is not the one that I want it to be. So let me just copy this. I'll rename that to Portuguese. And now if I run the script again, it should export now also the Portuguese ones. Hopefully. Yeah, well, believe me, it works. On the demo, it never works. But yeah, if you use these plugins, like something with my file permissions here didn't work out, but if you just manage to duplicate the file, which is something that I'm not going to do here, it will work, I promise. Okay, so upload to iTunes. Once you have all of your screenshots generated with Sketch, you can use something very nice called Deliver, which is a part of Fastlane tools. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. Maybe 15 minutes ago you heard about this these tools, but it's, yeah, so they have this suite of tools, most of them focused on iOS. And one of them, so Deliver, it's, yeah, of course focused on iOS, but there are some of these tools that you can actually use as part of your Android framework because it's very compartmentalized. But anyway, if you don't find a nice update tool for the Play Store, this Sketch screenshot generation is definitely something that you can use for Android projects as well. So I'm sorry it took so much time, but to sum up, finding a nice tool to work with your translators will allow you to work from day one with a localizable project. If you're doing an iOS app, there is a lot of things under the hood that can be done for you regarding plurals, formatting, and everything. And once you are able to automate delivery instead of paying other people to do this really annoying job of generating screenshots and uploading them manually, you can sum it all up in one script that would just run for a few minutes, and then you have all of your screenshots. So there's some links. I'll share this presentation in the end, but there's links for the demos that I did and all the plugins that I used and all the tools that I mentioned here, and also the links to download Memorado. So that's it. Thank you.
Sorry. So the service that you use for translation is not a crowdsourcing. You have your own translators. Okay. And have you ever heard about Crowdin? Because we use Crowdin. It doesn't have any support of that command line stuff, but have you heard about this or used?
No, to be honest, not. Like we used Web Translated to make everything work with our code and translators work, but then we have an outsourced translating company that we give them access to Web Translated, and then we have contact with the translators individually. But I never tried crowdsourcing. But I think it's something to think about if you are probably starting your own project, depending on the pricing, of course. Like if you're doing a free time project, your own app or your own game, I think definitely crowdsourcing, or a tool like Web Translated can even be used if you just want to ask your friends who speak these languages to translate these for you. And then you don't give them a JSON and get a JSON back. You give them like login access to this portal. They will translate everything on the web, and then you can import that into your code with a command line tool. So it can be used for any kind of translations.
Cool. But just another question. Does that offers like some translation suggestion? Because this crowding also sometimes when you have some words, there's some translation suggestion that we use right away. Yeah,
they do. So whenever you have a new translation, there is already some suggestions for how that can be translated. I think it's based on other translations in the same project, or also some crowds things that they do. Because sometimes you get suggestions that are not in our project, or just receive these suggestions. I don't know where they get this from. Some kind of cloud service, Google Translate, I don't know.
Okay, cool, thanks.
How do you make sure that your translator knows the context of the translation? Because this like example, that was a very good example, these names of the months, they were correct in the context. If you put the full date, like 1st of July, that's correct. But if you put just a month, it's a different form.
Okay.
So how do you tell the translators, and how do you verify it afterwards if the translation is correct?
Yeah, so we have in-house, we have one person who is responsible for part-time for dealing with the translators and communicating with them. We try to provide as much context as we can from the text key, so that our text keys are very descriptive. We also have space to provide a comment in the text files, a comment that will be also uploaded to Web Translated. Even though I'll admit we don't often use these comments, we should to help the translators, but we don't often use them. But we have this person that will deal with the translators. The translators can sometimes ask questions as, what is the context for that? What kind of screen is that? And then we'll always be sending them, or this person in our office will always be sending them screenshots of the app, of the context. And when they cannot answer it, she actually asks the developers. We developers also have access to the translation portal. So we can also go there and explain a little bit more about the context and explain a little bit more about give some screenshots, give some context. But the good thing about a portal like Web Translated or Phrase app or any of these translation providers is that they give you kind of like a forum where you can talk to your translators. So they can ask questions, we can actively give them more context, but there's a lot of back and forth communication for sure.
One more question. When you define the one, few, many, more, and other, how do you define the ranges of numbers? So
this is apparently something that is, how to say, it's a standard, actually. It's like a standard defined for grammar use. So as you can see, you can find on unicode.org all of these rules, and they have these examples, but apparently these one, few, many, and other, they are keywords for these specific kinds of contexts. So these ranges, they are embedded in these keywords. So I think for every language that has few, that would be all the same. That's my assumption, actually.
Cannot be right. No.
Yeah, because the only thing that I had to input in the dictionary is these keywords, and that's it. And for instance, for the examples of the languages that I know, that I saw, they all work. So for Brazilian Portuguese, it's one and other, and that's it. We only have singular and plural, not different types of plurals. And for Polish, there is these things. And by just inputting these keywords, it was apparently right. Like you guys told me.
There are the rules there on the right side, yeah? And they are probably different for different language.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that you have to provide in the dictionary, it's these categories. I don't know if maybe the foundation, the framework itself has these rules embedded, and just by providing the keyword, it can access these rules, or if these rules are something that are global for languages. These I actually don't know, but I would say that if the rules are different for each language, then by giving this key to the framework can access these rules internally, just like it can access formats, dates, and stuff like that. Makes
sense. Thanks.
On iOS, when you have this function localized string for key, I don't know exactly the name. So you define the key and the comment. How you define the comment usually? What's kind of the rule for the comment?
So this is what should be. This comment should be something to help translators know context about that. So it's any text that you input there, it will be added to the strings file, and Web Translated can also read that, show that to the translators. But in the end, it's something that we rarely use. So even in the Swift version of this function, there is no space for the comment anymore.
Yeah.
It's just text key, default value, and the table, and that's it.
So okay.
But the comment should be that. Should be any string that you can put, like a comment for giving the translator some more context about that.
Okay, cool. But you usually in your project you don't do that.
We should.
What's the default?
The default, we just said nil.
Okay, yeah, that's all. Okay.
So this is one part of the application side of localization, and there is the other one, which is App Store localization. And you said that your app is in Polish and Czech languages, but on the App Store there is no way to specify the description and meta tags for these languages. So do you use just English there, or you just have like separate builds for these countries?
No, we don't have separate builds for sure. Okay. It's just the same build. And I don't know actually how the description looks for Polish and Czech. Like if it's a limitation of the App Store, then probably it's in English.
Yeah, because like iOS supports like over 100 languages,
Mhm.
but App Store supports like 30 or 40, no
Yeah.
more. And there is no Polish, there is no Czech. And
Yeah, I mean, I realized that at some point we got a little bit greedy with these languages, to be honest. Like one example is that, so we were defining languages as just going online, seeing what were the most spoken languages and going with the rank. As soon as we release a new update, go to the next language on the rank and try to put it there. And at some point we just realized that we also translated it to Urdu, which is a Pakistani language. And apparently you could not change, at that point you could not still change the iOS device to Urdu, even though we had all the translation done and we had everything. And on Xcode you could select Urdu as a language to export that, but users could not select Urdu as a language on their devices. So in the end we just, when we upload to App Store, we'll leave it all in the hands of Deliver, this command line tool, and it will do that. We just do some checks. So probably some people in the company know how it's looking for Polish and Czech, but to be honest, I don't know how it's looking there. Maybe if somebody could open the App Store there and search for Memorado, you can see how it's in the Polish App Store, how is the description. But I don't know. If it's not supported, then it's probably in English. Even though we definitely have that text localized, is maybe not used in the App Store.
You have shown some tool to make the localized screenshots for the iTunes. Do you use any tool to upload the screenshots and the localized text and description?
Yeah, this is the tool I mentioned in the very last slide. The tool is called Deliver, and it's a part of Fastlane. So you just give it a lot of JSON files, each one for each language with the App Store description. And you also give, in these JSON files, the location for the folder with the specific localized App Store screenshots. And then this tool will upload everything to iTunes Connect accordingly. So it's a part of these Fastlane tools, open source. It's all on GitHub. There's links for it also on this last page. And the thing is, the first version that the guy developed, it was screen scraping the iTunes Connect webpage. So there was this Ruby script that would like run a browser internally, do the screen scraping and fill in the forms correctly. But now he has upgraded that with a version that has actually accessing an underlying API for iTunes Connect, which I don't really know how it works, but it's much faster now to do this tool. Yeah, so there's links for it, and it's called Deliver. It's a part of the Fastlane command toolset.
Okay, thanks.
Connected to that as well, the sketch files that you had with the screenshots, they were not real screenshots, like the backgrounds were, but the text were like vector or text which are embedded in there. So you manually pre-processed those screenshots to add those text instead of the screenshots.
Yeah, so this is something that I was going to mention and I forgot. So we chose to do it like this. We have this sketch file with our screenshots. That was a little bit of manual setup to set up these files in the first place, and then we can automate by setting the names of these labels to the text key on the JSON file, and then this script can just throw the translated text in there. But also as a part of Fastlane tools, I think today is just free advertisement for Fastlane tools. Yeah. But one of these tools, it's a lot of command line tools, and one of them can also do screenshots of your app automatically, like using how to call interface automation, UI automation from Apple. So you can configure it something like go to the first screen, click this button, take a screenshot, then click this button, take a screenshot, and you can have it on a separate tool as a part of the same tool set. Another one that will get these screenshots and apply the device margin around it. So you can actually do it all automated as a part of Fastlane tools. We decided to have it on Sketch because it's just much faster. It's much more work initially to set up this Sketch file, but once you run the script, it's a lot faster. If you're going to actually take screenshots of your app, it can take, depending on the amount of languages and the amount of screenshots, it can actually take a couple of hours to take all the screenshots.
But if you take the screenshots, the text there will be just images, not the texts, correct? If you do use the Fastlane.
So what Fastlane can do is take this screenshot here of the app, apply this margin. I'm not sure if it can do this background and text.
That's the thing, yeah. Because it's also I also noticed that you also translated the text which are in the app itself.
Yes. So this is all vectors.
Yeah.
I can show you maybe
So
one here.
just the background is bitmap, yeah, and then
Yeah, exactly.
and then all the. But
So
did
for
you do
instance-
anything special in the app so that it shows without the text at all, so that you can apply those texts?
No, the good thing that we had is that the same designer that did these screenshot files was the one that was providing the assets for the app. So he was able to just pull all these together himself.
Okay.
So this in here, it's nothing like a screenshot. Everything is separate vectors in here.
So these are designs, really.
These are designs, yeah.
Screenshots. Okay. 'Cause the name is misleading in the file name.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, it's just because this will export the images for the App Store. But yeah, it's misleading.
That makes sense.
And by the way, the same designer that did our assets, he did this sketch file, and he also changed the plugin scripts for Sketch, and I think he even wrote one of them. So he's like a coder designer, really nice guy to have in the team.